I can't believe I'm even giving a speech here today about this, because it's such, it is such a violation of our civil liberties and our Constitution that sometimes, as reporters, we can't even believe that this exists. But it is a reality, and unfortunately this story has been heavily censored from mainstream media, and so the majority of Americans have no idea that because of the National Defense Authorization Act 2012, you cannot be detained indefinitely without trial. A little background on NDAA, it's passed into law annually. It specifies the budget of the Department of Defense, and it's tied to soldier pay. That last little nugget is the key to why Obama keeps making excuses for signing it, because he says, well, we have to pay our soldiers, so I know it says that we can indefinitely detain you and throw you in jail without a trial, but we need to pay our soldiers, so I have to sign it. Instead, we believe he could use that soldier pay as leverage to get Congress to change the NDAA, but he's not doing that. So NDAA, really, the main thing it does is includes provisions to expand the war, expand the power of the U.S. government and fight the war on terror. It allows the U.S. military to jail anyone it considers a terrorism suspect. What is terrorism anymore? I don't know. It's a very broad, definition. Anywhere in the world without trial, indefinitely until the end of hostilities. When are the end of hostilities? We've been fighting a never-ending war. Quite disturbing. It grants dictatorial powers to the federal government. And the ACLU, obviously very upset about the NDAA. This is a statement they released when they found out, before it was passed, when they found out it had the indefinite detention clauses, saying that for the first time in American history, we have a law authorizing the worldwide and indefinite military detention of people captured far from any battlefield. The NDAA has no temporal or geographic limitations. It is completely at odds with our values, it violates the Constitution, and corrodes our nation's commitment to the rule of law. So after public outrage about this, we thought the Obama administration was going to just get rid of the indefinite detention, Section 1021, and pass it anyway. But getting rid of the indefinite detention, he made it seem like that's what he was going to do. Unfortunately, he surreptitiously signed NDAA 2012 into law on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2011, when most Americans, including myself, were out partying, distracted, and drunk, and had no idea this horrendous violation of the Constitution was taking place. In his signing statement, this is the kicker here, he says, I want to clarify to you all that I just signed this, but my administration will not authorize the indefinite detention of, without trial of American citizens. So don't worry, we're not going to do this. But what about future administrations? What about 10 years from now? I mean, this is a slippery slope. So after that, it caused a bit of outrage on the internet. Quite a few memes were created. This one, promised to veto NDAA, then signs NDAA. Campaigned on closing Guantanamo Bay, but then signs a law allowing the indefinite detention of American citizens. Constitutional law professor, but then he passed the NDAA. The Constitution still exists. Hope you don't get indefinitely detained. And he signed the NDAA 2013, Get Your Ass to Mars, which a lot of us journalists felt like doing after this. As it stands, NDAA violates the 1st, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and 8th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution and most of the Bill of Rights. So the act is so broad and vague, it extends indefinite detention without trial to anyone who gives substantial support to Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces. I don't know how you get more broad with that language. There are no provisions in the NDAA to protect journalists or anyone who interacts with these groups. And that is what is most damning to journalism in the US. Because a lot of us, because of the type of journalism I do, I have to submerge myself with a lot of these groups to find out if they're really terrorists, like the government says. I can be accused of being a terrorist or offering support, and I can be NDAA'd. And that's almost a joke between us journalists now. It's like, oh, gosh, don't do that story, you're going to get NDAA'd. And it's a sad joke, but it's one that is reality. So after this came out, I was really pissed off, and I made this meme and sent it around the internet. Just to try to do anything to raise awareness, to let people know, like, this is literally what this is doing to journalism. I saw working in the mainstream that when Obama was subpoenaing journalists, just subpoenaing them for information, it was killing my ability to talk to people who were wanted by the federal government or alleged terrorists. because CNN didn't want to pay the legal money to fight a subpoena. Okay, now can you imagine what's happening in newsrooms when reporters are asking to go talk with terrorist organizations knowing that the NDAA exists? I can't imagine editors are allowing them to do that, or I can imagine there are a lot of stories that are being killed because of this. A lot of people complained. They said, you know, what are you doing with all that vulgarity in your meme? So I said, fine, you know, for the children, I'll take out the vulgarity. And I sent out this one next. And really was just hoping that to somehow, you know, I don't have a huge platform now, just raise awareness about what's going on. So the chilling effect on journalism, as I said, you know, we fear that the US government is going to use NDAA as retribution for critical reports. We've seen them go after journalists in the past. Maybe your story comes out, you expose someone for being correct. They don't retaliate, but maybe 2 years later they do, or all of a sudden the IRS is examining your reports like they've never done before. You know, there's weird ways that the government gets back at journalists, and this one is terrifying. They could connect a journalist interaction and reporting on terrorist organizations as supporting terrorist organizations. Independent journalists who embed with these organizations to discover the truth could be accused of terrorism. Bloggers, indie journals. What about these journals that don't have the backing of a CNN? Also, it's going to keep sources and whistleblowers from leaking to us, because now they have to worry about being accused of supporting terrorism with their leak and then being NDAA'd. I cover Anonymous a lot. Anonymous has been loosely connected to being a terrorist organization. What happens if the federal government comes to me and says, we want to know who that source was that gave you that information? And I say, it is my job as a journalist never to reveal my sources. I will not give you that information. And all of a sudden, now I'm accused of offering substantial support to a terrorist organization, and I'm NDAA'd. I mean, we are on a slippery slope to that being a reality. And it could be, because look what happened to this journalist. This is an Al Jazeera cameraman who worked in Pakistan. He was arrested in December 2001 while traveling to Afghanistan on a work assignment. His name is Sami Al-Haj. He was held at Guantanamo Bay for 6 years without charge. And he says during those 6 years he was reported to, he was forced to watch individuals having sex in front of him, which is against his religion. He was tortured, hooded, attacked by dogs, and hung from a ceiling. And he says repeatedly interrogators questioned him about whether Al Jazeera was a front for Al-Qaeda. So this is a journalist that's happened to. So this is, I'm not up here saying crazy things. I mean, this is a reality that has already happened and could easily happen in the future in the US. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hedges says that he spent about 20 years covering terrorist organizations, Hezbollah, Hamas, also organizations in Central America. He remembers when officials would verbally connect him to those organizations because of his coverage and verbally criticize him for giving those organizations a voice. And now it's law that he could be actually connected to them and then disappeared. And that really worries him. Also because he's seen people like Alexa O'Brien. Alexa started a group called US Day of Rage. And that's a group that essentially forced people to go out, hit the streets, or encourage people to go out and hit the streets on September 17th to start the Occupy Wall Street movement. And the Department of Homeland Security sent out memos saying that the US Day of Rage was likely being organized by cyber terrorists. The media followed suit, published those memos, and also the feds visited her place of work and started questioning whether she was a terrorist, questioning her job, her employers. And eventually she lost her job. So once again, at NDAA, this just shows how it can affect the average Joe. If the government wants to say that you're supporting terrorists, she could have easily been disappeared. So luckily Hedges and Alexa O'Brien and a group of intellectuals, including Noam Chomsky, Daniel Ellsberg, have gotten together and sued the federal government over the NDAA. Chris Hedges calls it the last thin line of defense between what's left of our anemic democracy and our transformation into a military state. So they did win the lawsuit. The Judge Catherine Forrestor, said that she put an injunction on Section 1021, which is the section that includes the indefinite detainment clause, and she declared the NDAA unconstitutional. So they were all celebrating, all of the plaintiffs. They were very excited. They thought, wow, we have some justice right now in the US, and this is really positive for this case. But then right away, the Obama administration demanded an emergency hearing. The trial, Forrester's ruling came down on a Friday. They had an emergency hearing that next Monday at 9 a.m. And they asked the judges in the name of national security to put an emergency stay on the injunction, and they won. That worries a lot of NDAA opponents. Because of the aggressive response, they knew the administration would appeal, they just didn't know it would be so aggressive. And because of the aggressive response, they believe that it's fair to conclude that the Obama administration is already using the NDAA's indefinite detention provisions. And maybe other journalists that we don't even know about are in Gitmo right now because of these reasons. You know, the main reason the Al Jazeera photographer was known about was because he worked for Al Jazeera. But can you imagine other independent photographers who don't have the backing of a major organization? There may be some of them that are locked up now.